Maybe Easton wasn't acting like herself, but he was pretty sure she had the good sense to hunker down at the Winder Ranch during a storm like this. If she did venture out, he was pretty sure she was smart enough to slow down when conditions demanded it, especially since he and his foster brothers had drilled that into her head when they taught her to drive. So if that driver wasn't Easton, who was barreling toward his ranch on the cusp of a ferocious winter storm? Somebody lost, no doubt. Sometimes these remote canyon roads were difficult to negotiate, and the snow could obscure landmarks and address markings. With a sigh, he spurred Tag toward the road to point the wayward traveler in the right direction. He was just wishing for a decent pair of optics so he could get a better look at who it might be, when the vehicle suddenly went into a slide. He saw it coming as the driver took a curve too fast, and he pushed Tag faster, praying he was wrong. But an instant later, the driver overcorrected, and as Brant held his breath, the vehicle spun out on the icy road. It was almost like some grisly, slow-motion movie, watching it careen over the edge of the road, heading straight for Cold Creek at the bottom of a maybe 5-foot drop. The vehicle disappeared from view, and Brant smacked the reins and dug his heels into the horse's sides, racing as fast as he dared toward the slide-out. When he reached the creek's edge, he could barely make out in the gathering darkness that the vehicle wasn't quite submerged in the creek, but it was a close thing. The SUV had landed on a large granite boulder in the middle of the creek bed, the front end crumpled and the rear wheels still on the bank. Though he tried not to swear as a habit, he couldn't help hissing out a fierce epithet as he scrambled down from the horse. In February, the creek was only a couple feet deep at most, and the current wasn't strong enough to carry off an SUV. But Brant would still have to get wet to get to the vehicle. There was no other way around it. He heard a faint moan from inside, and what sounded oddly like a tiny lamb bleating. "Hang on," he called. "I'll get you out of there in a minute." Just in the minute or two he had stood surveying the scene and figuring out how to attack the problem, darkness had completely descended, and the snow stung at him from every direction. The wind surged around him, taunting and cruel. Even as cold as he was from the storm, he wasn't prepared for the frigid shock of the water through his boots and his lined Wranglers as he waded up to his knees. He heard the moan again, and this time he isolated the sound he had mistaken for a bleating lamb. It was a dog, a tiny one by the sound of it, yipping like crazy. "Hang on," he called. "Won't take me but a minute, and I'll have you out of there. Then we can call for help." When he slogged through the water and finally reached the vehicle, he yanked open the door. The driver was female, in her mid-20s maybe. He had a quick impression of wisps of dark curls that looked stark in contrast with her pale, delicate features. With every passing second, her core temperature would be dropping, and he knew he needed to extract her from the SUV and out of the water and the elements before he could completely assess her condition, though it went against every basic tenet of medical training each Army Ranger received about not moving an injury victim until you knew the extent of injuries. "Cold," she murmured. "I know, I'm sorry about that." He took it as a good sign that she didn't moan or cry out when he scooped her out of the vehicle. If she had broken bones, she wouldn't have been able to hide her discomfort. She didn't say anything at all, just gripped his jacket tightly, her slight body trembling from both the shock and the cold, he guessed. She wasn't heavy, maybe 110 pounds, he judged, but carrying her through the ice-crusted water still took every bit of his energy. By the time he reached the bank and headed up the slight slope with her in his arms, he was breathing hard and was pretty sure he couldn't feel his feet anymore. He'd learned in the early days.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.